Hey there guys, I am the Six Machine and welcome back to another Warhammer video. So it's been a little while and I thought now would be quite a nice time to get another unit review video up while we have a probably somewhat quiet week on the 40k front. So I wanted to jump back in with the Gits and take a look at one of my favourite units now following the new chapter approved points changes that came in not too long ago, and that unit is the now extremely good, in my opinion, Killa Kanz. As we usually do, we'll be looking at the stats, the points, the abilities and any stratagems they can use to see if they are going to be worth taking in your WAAAGH. So the Killa Kanz did get a point drop in the latest chapter approved, going from a base 40 points to now a very cheap 35 points per model, which when you look at their stat line seems on the face of it to be incredibly good value. They come in squads of 3 to 6 and have a move of 6 inches, a not unreasonable weapon and ballistic skill of 4+, strength and toughness of 5, 3 attacks, leadership 6, and a 3-up save. It is honestly pretty solid for 35 points, and with a min squad costing you just 105 points in total, it is very, very easy to include a squad of these in your army now. The big takeaways, in my opinion, are that better than usual 4-up ballistic skill, the slightly worse but still not awful 4-up weapon skill, the mighty toughness 5, which with the ramshackle rule, as we'll see in a moment, is a brilliant toughness to have on these guys, and then there's somewhat lacking leadership of 6, which I will admit can be a problem. Losing just one Khan can potentially force the entire squad to run away, but that is somewhat unlikely to be honest, and leadership 6 certainly isn't as bad as say things like the mech guns with their leadership of 4. On the rules front, they do of course, being vehicles, explode, and they do have the WAAAGH rule. Although being neither characters nor core units, they don't unfortunately get to advance and charge, which would be amazing on these guys. They do however get that +1 attack in a WAAAGH thanks to having the Ork faction keyword. Possibly the biggest downside of their keywords overall is the fact that these guys, being Gretchen, don't get clan cultures. So no exploding 6s for Goths or fallback and charge with blood axes. That is a definite negative for the Killa Kanz, and at their old 40 point price tag, it was what in my opinion made them so borderline whether you would take them or not, leaning towards maybe not. But I have to say that even without that, at their new 35 point price tag, to me they are a lot more viable in games nowadays. And one of the many reasons for that is in their final two abilities, both of which are really, really good. Stratagem lets your Khans, if there are 3 or more in the unit, get +1 attack, so that is potentially 15 attacks from a unit of 3 in a WAAAGH, which really isn't all that shabby at all for 105 points. And yes, obviously it does go away as you lose models, but it is a solid bonus that can stick around for quite a while, especially if you have 5 or 6 of these guys in the squad. And of course, building on that survivability, their final rule, which is Ramshackle, is amazingly good on Killa Kanz. -1 damage against attacks strength 8 and above is, no joke, so good. Even on things like toughness 6 or toughness 7 tanks, it's really good. But on a toughness 5 walker, I really do think it is incredibly strong, because against toughness 5, your opponent isn't going to want to fire things like las cannons or melter at them. They're going to want to shoot them with medium level weaponry like heavy bolters and autocannons or shuriken cannons, and all of that strength 5 to 7, 2 or 3 damage stuff, which is ideal for going into toughness 5 units, is just going to be so much less effective against your Killa Kanz. And for a little idea, something like a full heavy bolted Devastator squad goes from killing a Khan in one salvo with 5.3 wounds done in the Devastator doctrine to instead doing a piddly 2.6 wounds, leaving your Khan alive with a good 2 or 3 wounds left. It makes such a big difference against the weapons that are tailor-made for taking out toughness 5 Killa Kanz profile models, so it's really, really powerful on those units. And of course, yes, your opponent can shoot melter and las cannons at your Khans, but if they do that, then, you know, fine, that leaves your Death Dreads, your Battle Wagons, and your other buggies safe to do all the damage that they can do to your opponent without getting shot at. On the weapons front, they can perform both in melee and at ranged, and with that 4-up to both ballistic and weapon skill, they can actually do pretty well at either. On the range front, they come stock with a big shooter, which is DACA 5-3, 36-inch range, strength 5, no AP, 1 damage. Nothing super scary, but again, that is still 15 shots within 18 inches from a min squad. So they can absolutely clear through enemy chaff units, kill 3 or 4 guardsmen, which may well leave a gap big enough for another unit or the Khans themselves to charge into your main target. Their other free weapon is the alternative Grots, which you can take. It's shorter range at 18 inches, but it has heavy 2d3 shots with blast, strength 6, no AP and 1 damage. So this could potentially be better at clearing out things like the 10 or 20 Gaunt squads or conscript squads if you really needed to get a bigger gap in the enemy lines. But for me, the big shooter is better overall. It's just more consistent with those 5 shots within 18 inches. It just has that extra reliability that even 2d3 shots with blast just doesn't really have. The other ranged options are a Scorcher, which for 5 points gives you a 12-inch assault d6, strength 5, minus 1 AP, 1 damage auto hitting profile. Again, this is a brilliant way to clear out chaff with an average of 3.5 shots per Khan, and by comparison, this will kill about 5 or 6 guardsmen compared to the 3 or 4 that your big shooter would. It is definitely better if you are planning on using the teleporter to drop the Khans right into your enemy's lines, because that 12-inch range isn't much of an issue then. But for that extra 5 points, you do need to weigh up if your Khans are going to be mainly focused on shooting, or if you do just want to get them into combat as soon as you possibly can, and instead maybe keeping the shooters and taking the hit of killing 1 or 2 less chaff units before you charge in, but saving you a few points in the long run. The final ranged option is the rocket launcher, an Ork staple and also a very hefty 15 points. At ballistic skill 4 though, it is definitely worth considering, because with D3 shots, blast and strength 8 minus 2 AP 3 damage, this can do a heck of a lot of damage to your enemy's army. With an average of 2 shots per Killa Khan, even a min squad of 3 will knock about 4 wounds off an enemy predator, and so a full 6-man squad could conceivably do a serious amount of damage to an enemy vehicle and may well kill it if you manage to spike your dice just a little bit higher than average. Of course, the downside is that full squad of 6 will now be costing you a full 300 points instead of the 210 that the cheapest loadout would. So again, you've got to weigh up, is it worth spending that extra 90 points if you want to be shooting or if you want to be in melee? For me, personally, the melee option is just so much better. Their Khan Claw, which they all have in their 35 point cost, is plus 3 strength, minus 3 AP, and a flat 3 damage. So they swing with their 3 or 4 in squads of 3+, or 5 if they're in a WAAAGH as well, strength 8, minus 3 AP, 3 damage attacks, hitting on 4s. That is from a full 6-man squad for 210 points, potentially 30 strength 8 attacks, and that does just under 19 wounds to an Imperial Knight in one go. So if you factor in some token shooting from their big shooters, that's an extra 1 or 2 wounds probably, so you could take a full 20 wounds, more if you use a reroll on a wound or something, from an Imperial Knight, a unit that is probably twice the cost of your Killa Khans. It is some seriously impressive damage output, and if that doesn't impress you, they can also wipe out 6 Thunderhammer Stormshield Terminators before they even get a chance to swing. So yes, Killa Khans can do a hilariously huge amount of damage when they get into melee. The big question is, of course, is how to get them there. With a 6-inch move, even advancing, it's gonna take you a couple of turns to reach the enemy lines, and this may be where the teleporter stratagem comes in. Because for 2 CP, you can put a full squad of 6 Killa Khans into reserve, and then turn 2, drop them down more than 9 inches from your opponent. And yes, I know being 9 inches away is a relatively unlikely charge, so is it worth it? Well, that's where the ramming speed stratagem comes in, because again, for 2 CP, you can use this on a vehicle unit, and when they charge, they roll 3d6, not 3d6 and take the highest, a full 3d6 for their charge move. And whilst they don't have here we go like other Ork units, you do still have that CP reroll if you need it, although I will say for a 9-inch charge with 3d6 you have a 75% chance to make it, so the odds are very much in your favour even without having to use that reroll. Is it pricey CP wise? Yes, 4 or possibly even 5 CP is a lot to spend, but at the same time it's very much worth it, I think. The final part of ramming speed is that on a successful charge you roll a d6, and on a 2+, one of the units that you've charged takes d3 mortal wounds. So between your shooting, the mortal wounds on the charge, and then your swings in melee, you do genuinely have a pretty solid chance of wiping out an Imperial Knight from full health in one go. And I mean, yes, then your enemy will likely focus your Killa Kanz down and try to kill them, but again, to be honest, with 30 toughness 5 3-up save ramshackle wounds to get through, that isn't a particularly easy task. And you can either let them be a sacrificial unit that will almost certainly make their points back the turn they arrive and then get killed, or if you really want to mess with your opponent, just spend 2 CP to auto pass morale and keep whatever is left around in your enemy backlines to cause even more havoc in the following turns. The thing about Killa Kanz is that if you are just running them up the board, yes, they probably won't make a huge difference except as being a pretty solid, reasonably cheap distraction Carnifex, but with the teleporter and the ramming speed stratagem, they can do a serious amount of damage across your enemy's army. With 6 models, they can potentially multi-charge a few units or tanks and either kill or tie up a big chunk of your opponent's army, and they do, with things like the Scorcher or the big shooter, have really solid chaff and screen clearing ability as well. So it is honestly quite hard to prevent them from making that 3d6 charge when they arrive. I mean, are they a bit of a one-trick pony? Yes, to be honest, they kind of are. But does that trick have a very good chance of going off and doing some serious damage to your opponent? Also yes, it genuinely does. And at the end of it all, even a full 6-man squad is still only 210 points, which I mean isn't nothing of course, but comparatively 210 points for 30 toughness 5 wounds is a pretty decent price to pay for a unit that can have a reasonably decent chance of taking out an enemy knight in one round of combat. So there we go. I mean, I've always been kinda keen on Killa Kanz even since the codex dropped and they were at their 40 point price tag, but with the chapter approved drop, I really do rate them. I think they are a very solid investment and a very powerful investment for any Ork list that can find the 200 odd points to bring them along. But what do you think of Killa Kanz? Do you like them more since their chapter approved point drop, or do you still think they need a bit more love before they are viable? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later guys.